Hey everybody, I just wanted to make a really short video, um, kind of a practical video, not really a spiritual video at all, but I was having a conversation with a good friend today and was reminded of this, I don't know, mantra that I had when I was young in my 20s, that somehow I just got, downloaded this information and it just made so much sense to me. And so it's very practical, but for those of you who are struggling, especially if you're having kind of a midlife crisis, um, which, to me, I just call that, hey, you're in midlife and you're unhappy. And there's probably a good reason for it. And so I think for a lot of people that reason is a spiritual reason. But there are also some very practical things. And interestingly, as you guys know, I saw for the past year cancer patients. It was, as a mental health counselor, I was working in a radiation oncology clinic and just seeing cancer patients all day. And interestingly, very few of them ever came in freaking out about their diagnosis. They were freaking out about how they had lived their life. And many of them were not diagnosed with things that were deadly. They were diagnosed often with stage 1 or 2 breast cancer. They would very likely live right through it for many, many, many more years. But they were in this really deep place of, wow, this is the first time I've really faced death, and I am extremely upset and unhappy. And so here are the three things that are just practical that you may want to consider for your own life, because if you're in any way unhappy like this, I bet you, if it's not a spiritual thing, that it's very likely one of these three things. So the first one is, do you like who you're with? These are kind of deep, so I'm not going to get into them in depth because we could talk an hour on each one of these. But oftentimes, we get married to somebody or we get in a long-term relationship and it's just too scary to leave. And sometimes, I wouldn't say you should leave. Sometimes it's just you were very, very much in love, but life got busy and you kind of grew apart and now you're not happy. And it's not really the other person's fault. It's just you need a new commitment, and maybe some help getting through this time. But oftentimes, and we all know people who have gone through this, and some of you may have too, maybe going through it now, where you realize, I never really was crazy in love with this person. I've never really enjoyed this marriage, and I've been in it for 30 years and been quite unhappy with it the entire time. And if that's the case you're in, like, it might be time to really start digging into that with a therapist. The second thing is, do you like what you're doing with your time? And for most of us, that means your job if you're still working. So again, I remember having clients come in that had done quite well for themselves. They were successful, they were vice presidents or presidents of companies, things like that. But they would come into my office in tears and say, I've spent my entire life building, I got into this industry when I was young. I just kind of found my way into it somehow. And I've worked my way up the ladder and I've done well and I've made a lot of money and I have a big title. And I'm looking at it now that I'm facing cancer thinking, why did I spend decades doing that? Like, I never really loved it. I love the paycheck and I loved the, applause or whatever else I got from it, but I didn't like what I was doing. And I was spending 8 hours a day. You sleep 8 hours, you work 8 hours, and you have 8 hours to take your showers and watch a few shows with your family or do something. She said, I spent like a third of my life doing this, my adult life, this one patient I'm thinking of. And so I ask you the same question, like, are you really enjoying what you're doing and really feeling fulfilled by it? And I think that for the most part, in general, when you are helping others, you're feeling fulfilled. It's not always true, and you can get overwhelmed and overworked. But I find that the people who are helping others in some capacity, like directly, like nurses, things like that, therapists, teachers, they tend to generally be quite happy, or feel fulfilled anyway with what they're doing. And then the last question is where you live. So who you're with, what you do, and where you live. And, many of us are quite happy with where we live, and that's great. But some people do get sucked into a place they don't really like. You know, maybe they lived in California their whole childhood and then met somebody up in Alaska and fell deeply in love and moved to Alaska, but never really liked it. It's just very different. Some people love Alaska. They get sucked down to California and really don't like it. So, you know, do you really like where you're living? Do you like your neighborhood? Do you like your neighbors? Do you like the city, the environment, all that kind of stuff? Because if you're really miserable with where you live, that could really affect your happiness as well. So I kind of think of that as a triad and kind of a three legged stool. And if any one of those legs is not right, the stool will fall over. And if two of them are not right, it will fall over fast. And if three of them are not right, like, wow. So think about those things for yourself and think about where you are with each one of those things. And they can all be fixed. That's the good news. But it does take a lot of courage at times, especially if you feel like you need to leave a relationship or you need to move from a place you've been for 20 years or change a career you've been successful in. I did that, you know. I'm there. I know how scary that is. It took me 2.5 years to leave my science job where I worked as an ophthalmology scientist and loved it. Really liked what I was doing, but I just didn't feel fulfilled, that I wasn't helping people directly. And that one little thing was just eating at me and eating at me, despite the fact I was working with great people in a job I really liked and traveling in ways I liked. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of time to get the courage to leave that. So I understand midlife crises are not easy. So for those of you suffering from any of those things, I thought I would just send a quick video to get you thinking about them. All right. Love you all.